This is a CNBC special presentation.
It's a good point because it depends whether it's a solicited or an unsolicited trade. You call your broker up and say, I want to buy XYZ, a very tiny little company with no earnings. The broker has at least a responsibility to say, you know what, I don't think this is a suitable transaction. I don't think the risk parameters are correct for you, and I don't think you should make the transaction. Now the broker has done their due diligence. They've advised you. If you go ahead and take that risk yourself, you probably don't have an action against the broker. But the corollary to the relationship between a broker and his client is Rule 405 of the New York Stock Exchange. Every broker has to know their customer. They have to know their goals, their objectives, their risk tolerance, their time horizon, what they're trying to achieve. And a broker is bound by a whole set of hierarchy in terms of rules and regulations of what they can or cannot do.
So why didn't you catch Enron? Why didn't you catch WorldCom? There aren't enough people to review these documents.
I think we have another issue here, though. If you take a look at the post-1920 stock market crash, we had an unregulated securities market. Then we had the 33 Act, the 34 Act, the 40 Act. What have we had in the 90s? We've had a deregulation of the stock market. At the same time, fraud's going up. We have the 1996 Securities Litigation Reform Act, the Private Litigation Reform Act. We put in safe harbor provisions, taken away aider and abettor law. We've made the environment deregulated at the same time that more Americans own stock.
Hello, welcome to Your Money, the show that helps you make it, manage it, and spend it. I'm Ali Velshi. John, I saw you nodding your head in what seemed to be agreement with that.
Well, it's interesting. You know, we talk about insurance. The cost of insurance, you have an insurance policy that an awful lot of people that defraud insurance companies, all of us pay for that.
Right.
If you want to have access to our capital markets, the cost of doing that is complying with Sarbanes-Oxley. But let's take a look at the reality. The reality is there are a lot more IPOs that have been taking place in Sarbanes-Oxley than before.
So the idea is people aren't running for the hills, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but that's misleading, John. John, that's misleading. The economy, there's been an uptick. You're looking at the bottom and the top. There are other causal variables. One is the economy's been an uptick. You got to be careful.
Yeah, but why is the economy in the uptick? We can talk about the economic side of that, but the fact is that people have more confidence, and I think Sarbanes-Oxley, not necessarily predominantly, but to some degree, has had an impact on transparency and believing the corporations are going to do what is correct, and that is provide honest information so that people can rely on that and make informed investment decisions.
This is World News Tonight, Sunday.
WorldCom's disclosure that it disguised nearly $4 billion in expenses has revitalized calls for cracking down on corporate crime.
The way to hit them where they really hurt is in their pocketbooks.
You're a corporate executive, and you knowingly commit a fraud, and you say to yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Is I have to get back the money. I have to disgorge the profits, but I'm not going to go to jail. If you stick someone up and steal their purse, you can go away for a year or two. But if you steal 100 million or 500 million from tens of thousands of unsuspected investors, you could get 6 months in the country club.
And what are the products
currently
that create the biggest problem for investors?
Well, coming off the bubble and the decline in the markets, there was a lot of churning going on. And
churning, which means unauthorized activity or too much activity in my account. Too much commissions.
A broker buys and sells aggressively, and not in keeping with your goals and objectives.
Gotcha.
And the reason is not to make you money. The reason is so the broker can make a lot of commissions.
All right, let's go from there.
Okay.
So there's a lot of churning.
A lot of churning.
Okay.
Even now?
Even now. But
Wow.
even more interestingly, I think one of the biggest problems in the bubble was over-concentration, which people don't talk about a lot. And that is not diversify. Let's say you want to be in the stock market. Let's say you want to own stocks. Let's say 75% of your money is in the stock market. You shouldn't have, if 75% of your money is in the stock market, you shouldn't have 60% of your assets in the stock market in one stock,
of course.
or in one product.
We just had a caller in the last segment, Dolan's On Demand, who has $600,000 in one mutual fund.
That's an example of overconcentration.
Yeah.
In depth, making money. Billions poured into mutual funds. Is this the time to get in? Are they safe? Of course, where there's money, there are bound to be scam artists. In Southern California tonight, authorities are combing through the financial mess left behind by a man who allegedly preyed on older Americans and their life savings.
The Securities Exchange Commission estimates that 250 investors lost between $5 and $20 million. Lawyer John Allen represents many of those investors.
Mr. Madden was using the money as he saw fit. He wasn't making investments in stocks as the charts indicate. He was simply going out, living a lavish lifestyle.
I think it was kind of a classic example of a typical CEO. It's first of all, it's very unusual to prosecute the heads of major corporations in America.
And Jim Comey's words were all the top brass of Enron is now under indictment.
Right, and it just doesn't happen. And why doesn't it happen? It doesn't happen because if you're a smart CEO, you're going to insulate yourself from the pecking order. What does that mean? That means that you're going to be in a position to say, you know, that's a departmental issue, that's another issue, that's an economist issue, that's a financial issue, that's a general counsel issue. I don't get involved in those areas. I'm the executive. These people report to each other. They have committees.
And if they're not honest, that's...
And I don't know what's going on down there. And you heard him say it in his press conference. He's saying, I'm not responsible for that. I might be the head of the company, but I don't know the day-to-day operation of these different issues. It's a fascinating situation. The reason it is because you've got, this is like a really three-dimensional chess game. And you heard in the press conference, or at least I heard stated, that Mr. Lay wants to move his trial up before Skilling. Now, that means that, you know, they're not going to get the information they might want to get in cross-examining Skilling, and so all of these counterparts are going to play into exactly what you said. Is the government going to put the pressure on Skilling? Is FASTA going to make good with the goods? Have they delivered documents? You know, it's one thing for testimony.
This is why they want the rush.
Documents really speak because they occurred at the time of the wrongdoing. This is not he said, she said afterwards in testimony. So maybe Mr. Fasto can help the government get to some documentation to back up the charges.
Martha Stewart's first legal line of defense collapsed today as the judge rejected Stewart's request to throw out charges of securities fraud and obstruction of justice. Judge Miriam Cederbaum ruled Stewart's motions were premature, adding Ms. Stewart's argument that Count 9, securities fraud, violates her First Amendment rights is also not persuasive.
The First Amendment doesn't give you a right to disseminate allegedly false information. And if the public was relying on Martha Stewart's published information about her stock or her dealings with regard to ImClone, then clearly it's not a First Amendment protected right.
Does this mean the ills of Wall Street and corporate America are cured? We'll find out what the experts say in a special roundtable on the state of the markets and the economy. That's all just ahead on Business Unusual. John Lawrence Allen is with me in the studio. John, you've actually been with us through Anderson, through WorldCom, through all of these things. Let's talk a bit about the penalties. In some cases, CEOs always had to certify, had to know that their books were honest, or had to say that their books were honest.
Well, they had to be sure that the information they're disseminating to the public is accurate and it's correct and it's truthful. The difference is now they have to swear to that under penalty of perjury, and with the Oxley bill, the Sarbanes-Oxley bill, they've added some severe penalties for either willfully reporting information inaccurately or knowingly reporting information inaccurately. And I think those penalties are going to make corporate executives be very certain about the information they dispense to the public. The transparency that we've been talking about. Maybe the markets are going to get a sense now that there's going to be more transparency and more accuracy and more truthfulness in the reporting.
John, we still haven't seen we have seen in some instances, very few instances, but we haven't seen the big stories, the CEOs of the big companies we've seen implicated going to jail. We've seen them arrested. We haven't seen sentences.
Yeah, and that's a good point you raised, because there's a big difference between arresting someone and then being able to